This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com. This episode of SketchUp, a 3D Toolbox, is brought to you by 3D Connection, makers of the Space Navigator. To learn more about the best way to navigate in SketchUp, visit 3dconnection.com. Hey there everyone, and welcome back to another episode of SketchUp, a 3D Toolbox. I'm Cameron Harris, and this is episode number 59. Now in our last episode, we textured all of our model of our small apartment right here. And what we're doing, the end goal here is to remodel this apartment. So what we're going to do first is get this apartment looking the way it does as of right now in real life, and then we'll be able to make modifications in SketchUp. And this is a really great way to do things if you're remodeling a room or an entire house even, is figure out what you want to change in SketchUp, because it's a lot easier to move furniture in a virtual world than it is in the real world. And today we're going to start working on modeling some of the furniture that's going to go around here. Specifically, we're going to start working on a coffee table, and this is an image of the coffee table in question, along with my feline assistant, as always. And this is a very cool piece. It's deceptively simple, I'll put it that way. It's a very nice shape. It's a very simple shape because it's just a table, but it has a lot of little details in it. This is a really great way to kind of get our feet wet when it comes to modeling furniture. So we're going to go ahead and start modeling that right now. Now, what I like to do when it comes to modeling furniture is, first of all, make sure that the room that you're modeling in is grouped. So if I click on this, you can see it selects everything. It is grouped. Now, what that means is I can take the rectangle tool and draw something here. Say this was a piece of furniture. I can double click it or triple click it and select the whole thing, move it around however I want. It doesn't stick to the model. That's because it's grouped. Grouping is very important, so make sure it's grouped before you start, otherwise you're going to have a really hard time separating the furniture from the floor and moving it around. So we've done that already. Now we're going to start modeling the table. Now this is, there are a couple different ways you could go about modeling this, and I'm going to show you a way that I really like for something like this that has a lot of details. This is kind of the sculpting method. Now, one thing I'm going to do right away is I'm actually going to use a section cut. Now, a section cut is very cool because it allows you to essentially hide a chunk of your model without deleting it permanently. And it's this button right down here in the toolbar, these section planes right here. I'm going to click once, and I'm going to click on this wall right here. Again, click once, and you can see it's kind of cut away part of that wall, but not the whole thing. What I want to do is I want to click on my section plane, use the move tool, and move it like this. So you can see I can just slide it back here, and eventually it gets rid of that whole wall. So that's just cut it. Now, the cool thing about this is not permanent. So if I select this section plane and hit delete, the wall comes back. I'm just going to undo that. So that's very nice. So this is a really great thing to do because it makes it so you're not, your view isn't as constricted. You're not going to go through a wall accidentally. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go up to View, and then I'm going to choose Section Cuts right here. I'm going to uncheck that. Actually, Section Planes. Sorry. Section Cuts, if I uncheck that, it'll remove the cut. But Section Planes removes that kind of interface around it. That makes it so that, again, I'm not looking through anything. And now I've got this nice empty space right here to work on. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build, I'm going to start building the coffee table. And to start with, I'm going to switch to the rectangle tool, and I'm going to make just a big square. Basically, I'm going to make a big cube, not a cube, but a three-dimensional rectangle that is the same basic shape as the table, but with no details, no holes, nothing. It's just going to be literally a big block. And I'm going to go ahead and use the dimensions that I've measured from that coffee table. So I can tell you for a fact it is 38 inches square. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this out and go 38, 38. There we go. And then I'm going to pull this up so that it is 20 inches high, because that's how high the table is. So that's how big the table is. Now, obviously, this isn't what it's going to look like, but this is going to give us our kind of our basic idea. This is where that table is going to fit into, right? So to start off with, well, for one thing, we need to start adding some details, and the main thing we need to add is legs. So obviously, it's not a solid block, right, like this. It has a solid block on top and then 4 legs. Now, to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the push-pull tool again. And I'm going to click, I'm going to press the Option key actually first, or the Alt key if you're on a PC. And you see when I do that, I get that little plus icon next to my push-pull symbol right there. That means that if I click and drag, I'm not going to actually pull that face. I'm going to copy it and pull it up. So I keep that extra line down there. What I'm going to do instead, though, is instead of pulling it up, I'm actually going to push it down. And I'm going to push it down 7 inches. That right there is the thickness of the top part of the coffee table. You can see it. Sometimes it'll make these faces purple because it turns them inside out. I'm just going to right-click and choose reverse faces. There we go. So that is excellent right there. So the next thing we can do is we can actually take the push-pull tool and grab this guy right here. Make sure we have it selected. And just push it all the way out, and it's going to vanish. So this allows us to then draw the legs. So we have this chunk right here at the perfect height and everything, and now we're going to add the legs down here. Except we're going to do one more thing real quick. We're actually going to use the push-pull tool and push it down again about 1 inch. Reverse faces again. Because if you look at the image of the coffee table, the top part has a bit of a lip, and then it goes in, and then there's the rest of the solid part of the table. And what I measured when I measured the coffee table was the widest part, which is that lip that sticks out. So this part up here, this 1 inch slice up here is perfect. This part down here, however, is a little bit big. So we're going to use the push-pull tool and just push it in about 1 inch, actually. So we're going to do that. And I'm just double-clicking on the other faces to apply the 1 inch push to all of them. And you can see we're already getting a little bit of a lip right here. That's excellent. If you want to, you could use the eraser tool and come in here and just kind of trim away these extra lines that were left by the push-pull tool. Don't need to, but it does make the model a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to work with. There we go. Okay, now you can see that's looking more and more like our coffee table all the time. So the next thing we want to do is use the rectangle tool. And actually, what I'm going to do here is first, I'm going to group this. Okay, so I'm going to make that a group. So that top part of our table is a group. Next up, I'm going to draw the legs, and the legs will now be separate from this because they're grouped. So I'm going to go ahead and use the rectangle tool, snap it to this corner right here. There we go. Draw it out, and then it's 3.5 inches square, so I'm going to go 3.5, comma 3.5. There we go. And then I'm going to pull this down, and you can see if I do that, I can just snap it to the floor, and it looks good, right? Now here is a little bit of a trick. These legs are not actually completely square like this. They taper down at the very bottom. So what we're going to do is instead of that, I'm going to undo my push-pull. I'm going to stick with this right here, select it, hit the F key, and I'm going to offset it. I'm going to offset it about, I think, 1 inch. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Actually, maybe a little bit less than 1 inch. Let's go for 0.75, 3/4 of an inch. That looks good. Now, if I double-click and select this interior face right here, switch to the Move tool and pull it down, I'm going to hit the down arrow key so it locks it to the Z-axis. You can see right there, as I pull it down, there we go, it tapers. So it kind of stretches it out. That is excellent right there. Now it's completely reversed, so I'm going to triple-click to select the whole thing. Notice that because the table is grouped, it doesn't select that when I triple-click, and I'm going to reverse the faces. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to double-click on this leg, or triple-click, excuse me, select the whole thing, right-click, and I'm going to make it a component. And I'm going to call this component coffee table leg. There we go. Now, you might remember, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say a component, go back and watch our episode on components. But basically, a component is like a group, except that if I drag a copy of this out and then make a change to it, so say I go into this one and I add something. I add this and I pull it out. You can see it does it to all of the components at once. So that's a very, very handy time saver, especially when you have duplicates that are supposed to be exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this guy. Switch to the Move tool, hit the Option key, and drag out a copy. I'm going to just line it up with the corners right here. And then I'm going to select both, actually. Select Move tool again, drag out a copy of both of these two legs, and then right over here, snap it right there. There we go. So now we've got our legs. Excellent. Now I'm going to switch back up to the top portion of the coffee table here, and we're going to add a little bit of detail to the top portion. If you look at the image again, and you look past the cat, you can see that there's a glass top, and that glass top is showing sort of like a little display area underneath the glass. That's what we're going to work on next. So again, make sure that you are, actually for this, what I might do, because my legs are components, and that means that they're effectively grouped now, I can actually just right click on this and explode it. That way I don't have to keep double clicking to go inside of it. Just want to make sure I remember to group it once I'm done. So let's go ahead and make the glass top. So we'll select the topmost face of our coffee table, and we will hit the F key and we'll offset it in. And for this, I'm thinking about 5 inches is going to be about right. So we'll offset it in 5 inches. And then I'm going to use the push-pull tool, make sure I have this selected, and push this down. Now there's going to be a little bit of a weird thing going on here, and you'll see why that is in just a sec. I'm actually going to go ahead and just push it down until I can see it kind of poking out the bottom. That way I know that it's pushing through the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and make this, I know that this whole thick part here is 7 inches, so I'm just going to make this 6 inches. So type in 6, and boom. Now, what we have here is we have another face right here that is kind of blocking our way. And that's the face from this under part here. It's this right here. You can see if I select that, it's still that, right? Basically, what I want to do here is I want to delete that. Now, I could just select it and delete it, and you can see that works. But what I want to do is I actually want to make sure, you see how where it intersects here, there's purple, there's white, there's no black line, right? That's a bit of an issue. I want to make sure there's a black line there, otherwise I'm deleting a face that I don't necessarily want to delete because it extends out beyond what I can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to triple click on this thing, select the whole thing, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to choose intersect faces with selection. Okay, that means everything that I've selected, basically if faces, you can see now I've got a black line here. Because there were 2 planes intersecting here, it said, okay, we see that they're intersecting, that's a problem, we want to avoid that, so we're going to basically split the faces right there. Okay, and now if I select this, you can see there's a line of where it was, and that's fine, and then I can see straight through into my display area right here. So this is good, this is very good. Now, what I want to do here is I actually want to kind of push these in because these guys right here shouldn't be here. They should actually be further in. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push them in about 2 inches, and I'm going to double click on each one. So I'm giving myself a lip underneath here. You can do that, and you can see it's not affecting the outside. Always double check when you're doing stuff like this and make sure you're not accidentally punching through outside of your model. We don't want that. And then what I can do here, we have these sort of a little cross in the middle here that divides this interior part of the table into 4 sections. So I'm going to go ahead and model those now. So what I'm going to do for that, I'm going to angle myself so I can see in here, switch to the tape measure tool, and drag out a line from here. I'm going to hit the right arrow key to lock it to the red axis, and I'm going to find, there we go, where that little blue dot is, that's the center. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. There we go, perfect. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull out lines from each of these, just a quarter of an inch. So 0.25 there, and 0.25 there. I'll zoom in a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing here. Drag out a line here, 0.25, 0.25. Next, I'm going to switch to the eraser tool and just erase these 2 center guidelines. And you can see now I have these nice thick, half-inch thick lines here, guidelines, that if I trace those, I will have a half-inch thick cross in the middle here. That's exactly what I want. So I'm going to switch to the rectangle tool, line myself up down here and over here. So I've got a rectangle there, and I'm going to do the same thing there, and I'm going to kind of twirl myself around inside the coffee table and line it up right there. Next, I'm going to go up to the Edit menu, and I'm going to delete my guides because I don't need them anymore. And then I'm going to go here, and this little square right here, I don't want it dividing my cross, so I'm going to get rid of that. Perfect. Now I'm going to switch to the push-pull tool and pull this up. And you can see, got a nice cross there. I'm going to snap it to the underside right here, and there we go. Now that I look at this, this is actually a little bit deep, so I'm going to actually pull these up a little bit by about 2 inches. So I'm just going to pull all these up so that they're not quite as deep, a little bit more shallow. There we go. That looks more like it. Very nice. Okay, so now we've got this top portion. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and draw a rectangle on top here and just kind of seal that off. The reason I want to do that is because there's glass here. Now I could just say, oh yeah, there's nothing. There's an empty space. Imagine there's glass there. But it's easier and actually a little bit better to apply a glass texture to it. So I'm going to go ahead and in my textures palette, I'm going to click on the textures pane and choose translucent from my pop-up. And I'm going to go with, let's go with this right here and see what this looks like. This is a neutral color. It's 50% opacity. Let's see what happens. Pretty darn good. I'm going to bump the opacity down a little bit to 25%. There we go. So now there is a little something there. There is actually a physical object there, but it's clear. So it's like glass. So that's very good right there. So that's just a nice little thing to do. Don't have to, but and technically because this table is white, we're sort of modeling it as we go, or texturing it as we go. Excuse me. So that's looking very, very good. Now let's add a little bit of detail to the sides here. But before we do that, I do want to thank the people who are making this episode possible. 3D Connection. 3D Connection makes the Space Navigator, which I've said it many times and I'll say it again. It is the best way to navigate in SketchUp, and especially for what we're doing today, because we're dealing with a very small object. We're not dealing with a room that you can just walk around in normally. We're dealing with a coffee table. And the Space Navigator lets you move in such a way that you can get inside the coffee table as if it were a massive building itself. So I can just fly right in here, go through the glass, go right into a corner if I want to, and get really, really detailed. So this is a really great thing, not just for big stuff like a room, but for small stuff it is especially great. You can be so much more accurate with this than if you were to use just a regular old orbit tool in SketchUp and having to switch back and forth between that and the hand tool and then zooming in like crazy. It would be very, very difficult, and it's very disorienting and disconcerting a little bit. So it's much better, I think, to be nice and smooth with it with the Space Navigator. Be sure to check them out at 3dconnection.com. That is their website. And I want to thank them so much for supporting this episode of SketchUp, a 3D Toolbox. All right, let's wrap up our coffee table here real quick. Now, on the sides here, we've got our legs, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the line tool, and I'm actually going to draw a line from where our legs end right here. Draw it straight up. There we go. That's dividing my face into two parts. And I'm going to do that for each side here. And there we go. So I've done it for all four of my sides here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of push this face in a little bit, but not all the way, because there is a little bit of a kind of an angle right here that I want to kind of replicate. So what I'm going to do is actually use a guideline and pull it up by about 1/2 inch. There we go. I'm just going to draw that up on each of my four sides. There we go. And then going back over to my original side here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and draw a line across right here. So I'll just do it on this face, and then I'll just do it to all four once I'm done. So I'm drawing a line right there. Perfect. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and select this face up here and push it back by about 1/2 inch. So 0.5 right there. And then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to select this line right here and delete it. So you can see we're missing a chunk there. Now, what I'm going to do is right here at this little corner, I'm going to take a line. Now, normally the way it was like this, basically. Down like that, right? And then this was extended out. What we're going to do instead is we are going to take a line from this corner and drag it right down to this corner here. Okay? So you can see it's giving it an angle. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this line right here too. Now, it's still not filling in because it doesn't have all four sides for that face yet. But once I do this line here, it should connect. There we go. Get rid of that line right there. And now we've got a nice little angled divot right there. So I'm going to do the same exact thing for all four of the faces. All right, so now those faces are all good to go. And the last thing I'm going to do to kind of add a little bit of detail to those is actually not on all four sides, but just on this side and then the opposite side. I want to add some little metal handles. Now for that, I'm actually going to draw a little something using the line tool. So what I think I'll do there is I'll start out by just giving myself a guideline that goes about 6 inches in, and then I'll just give myself maybe an inch and a half from the bottom, an inch and a half from the top. This is something that you can kind of think almost like, you can almost think of it as freehand drawing, except I'm not actually going to use the freehand draw tool, funnily enough. Instead, I'm going to use the line tool. Actually, I'm going to start with the rectangle tool. Give myself a nice rectangle to start with. So that's the basic shape of the handle I want. And then what I think I'll do is I'll pull this down by 1/2 inch, and in 1/2 inch, and in another 1/2 inch. And what I'll do is I'll just use the arc tool, actually. And for the arc tool, I'm going to set the sides, before I start drawing, I'm going to actually set the sides to just 4 sides. There we go. Draw that out. Good. Don't need that many sides, that much detail for this. Very nice. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually switch back to the arc tool, set it more to, I'm going to set this back to 12 sides. I'm going to go up about, we'll go about 3/4 of an inch here, so 0.75. Arc tool, curve right here. Go all the way down here. And then I'll trim off the extra corners that I don't want. There we go. Now before I actually pull it out, because this is still like merged onto this, copying and pasting multiple instances of this would be pretty tricky if it were in 3 dimensions, but if it's 2 dimensions, I can just double click and select the general shape. And then I'm going to go ahead and give myself another guideline that comes out about 6 inches, and just copy the 2-dimensional shape over. There we go. So there are my handles. Now I can select both of these at once, use the move tool and drag a copy and just drag them over, and there we go. Now they're reversed, of course, but I'm just going to reverse the faces back, and then I'm just going to pull them out by 1/4 inch. There we go. And then I'll go ahead and pull open my textures tab, and I'll choose something from the metal section. Let's go for, let's see what this looks like. This metal corrugated shiny, that might work. Not bad, not bad. Let's try maybe this. Ooh, that's a bit nicer. Yeah, that looks a bit more like it. And then I'll just apply it to the sides as well, and those will be our handles. Beautiful. Gonna go ahead and close up my textures palette now. So now there's really only 2 more things we need to do to kind of finish off our coffee table. And one of those things has to do with these corners right here. These corners have a sort of a, not a divot, but a little thing that kind of sticks out, an extra little plate. I'm sure there's a technical name for that, but it escapes me right now. So I'm going to go ahead and select one of these faces. I'll choose this one right here, and I'll offset it in by about 1/2 inch. And then I'll offset it in again by about 1/4 inch. And then what I'll do is I'll select this face here and pull it out with the move tool like this by about 1/4 inch. And you can see that's what it does. So that's excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to the other faces as well. There we go. So I've done it for all of these things right here. So that's looking really good. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of detail to the legs down here. Now this is actually going to be pretty darn easy because these are components. If I change one leg, it changes all 4. So here's what we want to do. We want to add a little bit of a band around the middle of these legs. Okay? So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to first of all just go over here on this line, and I'm going to draw out, just choose right here, just a random little point, draw it out by 1/4 inch, and I'll do the same thing down here, draw it out by 1/4 inch, and then just connect the 2 lines. So now I've got this thing right here. Okay? What I want to do is, the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure I have, I'm actually going to switch to X-ray for this. I want to select, actually I'll go into the leg. I want to select this top part of the leg right here. So I'm actually going to draw a line right there. That's what I want, okay? I want to select this whole outer thing here, the outline of the leg. And then what I want to do is I want to, while that's selected, switch to the Follow Me tool. The Follow Me tool is a very interesting tool. It's very powerful, but it's a little bit tricky to use. And if you don't know how to use it, I would suggest you watch our episode on the Follow Me tool. I'm going to click on the Follow Me tool, and then I'm immediately, without clicking on anything else, I'm going to click on this shape right here. And you can see it adds that line around it. It basically traces around the leg, and it's a fairly complex shape to trace because it's slanted, and it adds the bands right there on all four. So that's excellent. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the bottom, and you could add a little bit more detail. This table has a lot of detail, and it would be impractical for me to show you how to do all of it in one episode. It'd be a really long episode. So instead, I'm going to just do a couple of basic things, and if you want to take it further, you know how to now. Switch to Follow Me tool and click, and there we go. So that, double click to get out of there, that is what our coffee table looks like right now. So that's excellent, and that's all we're going to cover for this episode. We'll continue with more furniture next episode, and we're actually going to do some modeling based off of photos, some photo rendering. And this is a very powerful tool in SketchUp. It can make things very, very easy once you know how to do it, but it's a little bit complex until you know how. Delete the guides. Beautiful. So thank you so much for watching. Until next time, be sure to visit our website at www.harwoodpodcast.com. There you can find the show notes for all of our episodes, all the way back to episode 1. We've done almost 60 of these. It's going to be episode 60 next time. Hard to believe. And also, if you want to download the lesson file for this episode, just go to this episode's show notes page and look down at the bottom of the page, and there's going to be a link to download this file as it is at the beginning. So if you haven't been following along, you can still download this room and model your coffee table in it yourself. Finally, if you have any questions or comments for me, you can email me at cameron@harwoodpodcast.com. I would absolutely love to hear from you guys and see how you're progressing in your own model. And other than that, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'll just say goodbye and good modeling.